Hello there, how you doing? Hope you're well. Welcome to today's ramble, whatever today is for you. So today I thought we'd go for something a little less relevant to our daily lives at the moment, but nevertheless it's still a hard question, and it's an important one to reflect on if we want to think Christianly, and it's: should all Christians be pacifists? It becomes an interesting question because actually it's not actually directly answered in the Bible. If you treat the Bible as your authority on how to live, it is actually answered in the context of the life of the church. So if you look back, you've got people like Augustine and Aquinas in the Middle Ages. Augustine about the 4th century. But it's not really explicitly answered at all, or even particularly inferred, within the New Testament. You could kind of rattle along in the Old Testament, say quite explicitly it's even commanded for the nation of Israel. But it's certainly not really there in the teachings of Jesus. You can infer from when Jesus is arrested, he says to Peter that my kingdom is not of this world, and those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. And so he's actively sort of discouraging armed conflict. But he's not really discouraging war or as such. He's making a statement about the nature of the kingdom of God, that it's not advanced by conflict. My kingdom is not of this world, and therefore for him we don't play by the rules of the world. And I suppose similarly St. Paul, when he's talking about obedience to the empire, he says that we should obey them because they don't hold the sword for nothing. So he's living in submission to the ruling empire. So what's going on in there? Well, I suppose if you focus on scriptural teaching, what it's really doing is emerging from the context of Christian faith and its expression as being the bringing of the kingdom of God into this world through personal living and through the new community that is the church, in growing that, and broadly speaking, it doesn't offer any teaching one way or the other as to whether we should go to war or not, or be a pacifist or not. Now that can be applied, and so you see for kind of hard end sort of Christian groups who see themselves as not of this world and who detach themselves from the political life of the world, thinking, well, it's not our business, we're part of the kingdom of God. So you can, and some Christian groups do that. They just say, well, that's not really our business, we're about this, so this is what we're going to do. Well, that's an option, and I rather envy that, because that's a rather straightforward answer to the question. But the reality is most of us live in the morass of the norms of this world. We live in the economics, we pay taxes, and we pay taxes that go towards a state that is involved in conflict, and we join in so much of the world that you actually have to engage with this question because you vote for your government, and you have to make decisions. So how do we do that well? Well, I suppose the answers came in the teachings of people like Augustine and Aquinas, and they came once the church became part of the state system. So in about the 4th century, the Emperor Constantine brought in Christianity and treated it as the empire's religion. Now, I'm quite sure an aspect of that act was simply to unify a fractious empire, and I would say it's fair to say that in lots of ways Christianity has been used for those purposes, and indeed I'd suggest even the Church of England and the Book of Common Prayer have an element where, say, King James, for example, is authorising the King James Bible to act as an ethical unifier of his subjects. So we kind of do have to engage with this. Well, what's a right approach? I don't know, but I think as Christians we can think Christianly into this kind of question. The thing we've got to make sure we're careful of is one, it isn't a kind of binary, either war or no war. And the reason we do is actually there are plenty of things that you can do Christianly that act to prevent armed conflict. Let's look at some of today's problems. Economic justice. I mean, it's a simple reality, isn't it, that economic injustice can be a driver for war. Commitment to truth. You can see some of the conflicts that are happening in the US are driven by these conspiracy theories that have got nothing to do with reasonable truth. So we can be committed to truth. Environmental justice and looking after the earth. You know, it's a predictable thing that actually in the years to come, environmental degradation and rising sea levels could easily lead to regional conflict and problems. So we can act to prevent those things by being committed to the benefit of the earth. So I'd say one thing you can do is, instead of having to answer, should I go to war or not, you can actually commit to acts that are acts for peace and shalom, well-being, oneness and togetherness. These are acts that are fully available to us as Christians engaged in the state, engaged in civic society, and should be encouraged and actively encouraged. But if we ask the question, should we enter into armed conflict or not? Well, I think that's a little harder, but we should recognise that actually quite possibly the ethical consideration is to allow an evildoer to thrive is an act of evil in itself. And one needs to appreciate that in a broken world with broken people, acts of justice and injustice, or more just or less just, are much more obvious than we'd like to imagine. I mean, the standout ethical decision is should Britain have gone to war against Nazi Germany? Yes. Now, we may have done it in ways that were not according to just war theory at times. And there certainly will have been acts of evil committed on all sides. But the hard reality is allowing great evil to thrive in both invading other countries and in subsequent evils at the time. Well, it's an act of evil, in my view, to allow that to prevail. And I'd say that that's connected in many ways to the work of our police force. Now, they call themselves a police service now. When I was younger, of course, they were a police force. And I think that lets you know something about what they're there for. They are there to administer justice and to punish wickedness, much as St. Paul reflects on. And they don't do it by being nice all the time. Sometimes they are forceful. They do things against a person's will. We have to accept that sometimes the prevention of evil is a forceful act and is therefore an act of good. You can choose ways of doing that are more or less just. And I think it's fair to say that the acts of a civilised society, informed by the ideas of Christian justice and peace, seem to bias towards better acts of justice and peace in the administration of law than those that are not informed by that. Not perfectly, I'm sure. So back to the question, should all Christians be pacifists? Well, you can guess. My opinion is no. But it's not because I think Jesus teaches us one way or the other on that. I really don't believe he does. It's a political choice, and you can make the choice to be fully pacifist and still be a Christian with integrity. However, I think, in the muddy waters of civic life, the Christian task is to be constantly oriented towards the good, even if we're not fully able to deliver that. There you go. That's this vicar's opinion. Thanks for listening.